Hello there guys, it's Joey, and this video is going to be bones in witchcraft. I'm going to talk a little bit about the energies of utilising mainly animal bones within witchcraft, and some of the misconceptions around it, some of things that I feel need addressing. I've been asked on a couple of occasions if I would talk about bones in witchcraft, and I sort of sat on it until I feel comfortable enough to do it, and that's why I haven't discussed it before this point. But I thought, and I was sat there today umming and ahhing about it, and I've decided that I will go ahead and give my views and opinions surrounding bones in witchcraft. But before we get to the I was going to say meat of the video, I feel like I should be saying skull of the video. Just a quick update for everybody. So there haven't been many videos, and people in the know why. There's been health scares within the family, and so I've been using all of my time and energy between sending healing and protection to my family members and the store. And we had the best news yesterday, which is that everything is clear within my family members. So all the healing, all the protection, all the energy, all the effort was 100% worthwhile. It's completely cleared, and it was just a huge sigh of relief. A side effect of that is there haven't been any videos, just because that's been my primary concern. So that situation is now dealt with, witched through, and we got the result that we wanted. So thank you to everybody who was there, and apologies to everybody wondering on the channel. It's been a bit quiet, and that's why. So moving on from that, we are today talking about bones in witchcraft. And this is going to encompass some talk about death energies, some misconceptions around bones in witchcraft, and so on and so forth. But I thought a really nice place to start would actually be quoting one of my absolute favourite witches, which is Sarah Ann Lawless. If you haven't read Sarah Ann Lawless's blog, on my knees, go read her blog. It's amazing. So there's a couple of bits that I want to read from her blog about bones, and then we're going to talk about sort of my opinions and feelings surrounding bones in witchcraft. Bones within witchcraft are a type of fetish. A fetish is an object regarded with awe as being the embodiment or habitation of a potent spirit, or as having magical potency. The word fetish originates from the French fétiche, which stems from the Portuguese word fetico, apologies if I'm saying that wrong, meaning charm or sorcery. And this next bit I think is really important. Feathers, bones, crystals and stones are all types of fetish. Skulls and bones have an appeal to witches who perform spirit work and are a necessary and simple way to connect with spirits of the dead and of animals. Working with bones is not just for necromancers or black magicians. Practitioners who work with bones are a wide range of healers, diviners, shapeshifters, root workers, witches, shamans, druids and pagans. Okay, and then she talks about cleansing bones. I'm not going to talk about cleansing bones. I can't. I'm going to try and find Susie's video about cleansing bones, and I forgot what her YouTube channel name is. Oh, pants. But she has a really good video about actually cleansing bones herself. And Sarah Ann Lawless talks about bone divination. Now, I don't know very much about bone divination. It's not something that I've really looked into, and it's certainly not something I have practiced myself. And so because I haven't practiced bone divination myself, other than obviously knowing about the, like, throwing knuckle bones and things in terms of divination. It's not something, therefore, that I'm going to talk about, because I don't have personal experience to back up what I'm saying, and I don't want to talk complete nonsense at you. Okay. And then the next part from the Sarah Ann Lawless is about animal bones. Are used in witchcraft and folk magic to commune and work with animal spirits as familiar guides and protectors. The bones of animals can be used to ground a spirit animal into this realm. Bones act as a spirit vessel for animal familiars to dwell in while you work with them. This doesn't mean the spirit lives in the bones all the time, but rather it is their home when you call upon them. Animal bones and skulls can be placed on an altar or carried in a medicine or crane bag to work with them outdoors or on the move. Animal bones can be incorporated into ritual jewelry for direct contact and easier communion with the spirits the bones belong to. Ritual jewelry using bones is the most practical and direct way of bringing animal familiars into rituals and spellworks. Many animals are shamanic in nature, enabling the practitioner to whom they are familiar to adopt their abilities to travel between worlds. Such creatures known to travel between the realms of earth, sea and sky, or have extraordinary powers of transformation, include frogs, toads, snakes, all birds, alligators, crocodiles, turtles, beavers, otters, dragonflies, spiders, beetles, butterflies, cicadas, and more. Animal bones are often used to craft ritual tools. Many traditional rattles are made using skulls, turtle shells, or little bones tied closely together. Some even incorporate them into carving their Futhwark or Ogham runes onto animal bones, or using slices of deer antler instead of wood or stone. Animal bones, hides and feathers have another important use in magic, shape-shifting. They are worn as jewellery or donned as a costume while going into trance, and to enable one to leave one's body, and so the spirit takes on the form of the animal, or you are led to a living and willing animal to possess temporarily. And then some use it within salves. Flying ointments sometimes contain parts of animals. Okay. That is getting onto something else. So, first and foremost, I'm going to just point out that I do actually have a piece of antler. This is stag antler. That is on my ritual jewellery necklace, and the rest of it is not. Obviously I have a talon charm, but it's not actual animal, that one. So there is only one animal skull bone in shot, and the rest that I work with are private, and they are not going to be for show. I have this particular skull, and this one is sort of a little bit more of a talkative spirit, and it doesn't mind being shown and used to visually represent, where the others are a little bit more of a personal, private, mysterious part of my personal, private witchcraft. So, that being said, I think there is a lot of stigma, misinterpretation and value judgment that is often laid at the door of bones within witchcraft. And it's understandable from certain perspectives. I understand where the animal welfare argument comes from. There is, of course, the fear aspect that comes into bones in witchcraft because of the sensationalization, the media propaganda against bones in witchcraft, and the idea of what a necromancer is. And there's this whole Hollywood evil side of things, which gets into the psyche. It basically creates fear around the idea of things such as skulls. And I actually included my crystal skull over in the far corner, one of them, because when I first was thinking about getting a crystal skull, I was really hesitant, and I was kind of put off by the whole idea of skulls. And now I'm like a skull addict. I love the symbolism of skulls. I love the energy of the physical form of the human skull. I don't obviously, well, I suppose I just not obvious. Okay, I do not own any human bones other than my own. But the physical representation of the skull for me is attached to my goddess, the goddess Morrigan. And the reason being is that she is known to be the collector of heads on the battlefield. And people see the Morrigan collecting skulls and being surrounded by skulls, and they immediately are apprehensive and or fearful about the goddess Morrigan. And what it actually denotes within Celtic mythos is that they believed that the soul resided in the skull, in the head. So by collecting the skulls on the battlefield, it's not this sort of grim trophy thing that people think it is. It's actually a duty of the goddess Morrigan to take those skulls of the fallen warriors on to the next stage of life, to be reborn, to take them to the underworld. And because skulls and bones are so associated with, obviously, death, they are a physical symbol of death, they are a psychological trigger of what death is, and they very much represent death in art and all forms of symbolism, that we see a skull and we think death, you know. And human beings are nothing if not fearful of what happens at the point of death, because as much as we believe or have faith or talk and discuss about it, the truth of the matter is that we don't know. And we have feelings and beliefs, and people very strongly believe that they have had past life experiences, past life regressions, which lead them to believe in reincarnation. And to me, reincarnation makes much more sense than anything else, because in my interpretation of how things are going, I've had dreams and memories and things of past lives, and triggered by all sorts of things. But also for me, I think it's kind of a sort of hubris to think that we can master all there is to know in one lifetime. And for me, it feels more like the soul would be reincarnated lifetime after lifetime to gather different experiences, to experience all that the earthly plane has to offer before becoming one with the realm of spirit and moving on. And that's just how I personally feel about that. But the key point is that the whole idea of death is something that human beings are just afraid of. And anything to do with death and death to do with witchcraft is immediately sort of tarred with this same brush. And even to the point where the word necromancy is considered, inverted commas, evil. And to be honest with you, necromancy can be something as simple as going to church, lighting a candle for a dead one, a dead ancestor. It can be going to the graveyard and putting flowers on a grave and talking to the person who's passed on, which is something that I think most of us do or have done within our lives. And that can be considered a form of necromancy, because in theory, by going and honouring your ancestor, you are honouring the spirit of the departed. Now, obviously, we're not getting into Hollywood standards of erasing the dead, because let's face it, it's just silly. Zombies, just until I see an actual zombie walking around other than people on their iPhones, it's it's this sensationalization thing, you know, this sort of, and some of it actually is practitioners themselves that want to appear big and powerful and scare others, you know. And really, I think with working within the realm of spirits, you either have a real respect or you probably end up in trouble yourself with regards to spirit work. Now, spirit work is something that I do want to talk about because, as the wonderful Sarah Ann Lawler states, crystals, stones, bones, and feathers are all kinds of fetish. Not like that. But basically, they provide a home for an energy. And crystals are something which people aren't afraid of, generally speaking. I mean, you'll have people who are afraid of everything to do with witchcraft, and that's just a form of conditioning which they probably will never leave. And there's very little that can be said when they're afraid of something and refuse to even open their minds to the possibility that it's not evil. But that aside, crystals are something that people just don't tend to fear, generally speaking, because they're prettier, they're shinier, and they're more complicated to feel the energy within, that sort of consider them a form of life. And just because it's a different life form, just because it's a different energy form, just because it's not as straightforward to our eyes and the visual way of interacting with the world, doesn't mean that its energy is any less potent or alive. And the same is true with plants, and I have talked about plant devas on a number of occasions now, and I've shared on the Facebook page the stages of honouring plants within magical work. And that's because I wholeheartedly believe that when you are taking a plant, you are taking its life. You know, when you are harvesting any plant, you are taking the life force, and then you are utilising it within magical spell work, or perhaps edible work, depending on what you're doing with it. But that's why on the Facebook page I have the stages of honouring and forming relationships with plant devas and the energies of plants. And it's to do with honouring the plant in life. You form a relationship with the plant deva, with the plant spirit. You are recognising it for being alive and having its energy, and honour it in death, in which that you request from the plant that you may take of its body, and you would leave an offering to the plant and thank it for its sacrifice. And you only take what you need from the plant, so you're not being greedy, you're not being disrespectful of the energy of the plant, and then honouring it in rebirth, in which the magic that you are performing, you are filling it with an intent, imbuing it, you are using it as an appropriate magical tool. And I think the same can be said for working with bones of all fashions. Now, the thing that I do understand is making sure where your bones have come from. I think there is a fear that witches would just, you know, grab hold of bones by any means because it's somehow dark and cool and scary, and they wouldn't treat them with respect. They didn't get them from an ethical resource, and I can understand that. And undoubtedly there will be people who do not ethically source anything, and this can be applied again to feathers and crystals and flowers, and I can understand the fear attached to that. But unfortunately, when you're getting into the realm of that, this becomes a personal value judgment. You can only control yourself. your behavior, how you do something. You know where you've got your feathers from, you know if you've got them from an ethical, reputable place, if you've collected them from yourself, if they're only free fallen. And I have a swan feather in shot because this was given to me as a gift by my dear friend, and it was picked up off the side of a canal. It was pre-fallen. And my antler came from Beth Wildwood, who works on an animal sanctuary and is naturally shed. And the bones that I have are all from ethical witches and or have been collected myself. So the thing about collecting bones oneself is that the animal has already passed on, the animal has already died, and the collection of bones from that point on is after the point of death. So for those witches who harvest bones in an ethical way, and again, you can be only responsible for yourself, the spirit has passed on, and it's just taking those materials, taking those bones and incorporating them into witchcraft. So there was last Beltane a dead crow on the village green, and I was directed by the goddess to take it home and to bury it, all of it, and just take a foot. And the bird was already gone, and I took it home carefully. I had a bag and gloves and things, and I took it home, and I honoured the spirit of the past crow, and I buried the crow, and I gave it a funeral rite, if you like, within the human understanding of a funeral rite, and just kept the foot as instructed. That to me is not disrespectful. It's a high level of respect for that, the energy of that particular animal, the crow being a dear animal to me within my pantheon, within the path of the Morrigan, and within magical work, which I do. And as I mentioned from the Sarah Ann Lawless blog, the main use of animal bones within witchcraft is the fetish. So the fetish is made up of animal bones, it can be made up of animal feathers. It becomes a house for the spirit of a particular animal, and this can be a totem animal or spirit guide, and it becomes a more sacred object. It means that bones are incorporated into witchcraft with the height of respect, with the height of sacredness, and the height of sort of, I don't know how to, it becomes a sacred object, it becomes divine, it becomes magical. It's not something which is evil or treated without respect or sort of a throwaway thing. And working with sort of spirits in this energy sense is something which people seem to have this fear of. And the fear does not seem to extend to when you say spirit guide, or spirit animal or totem animal, but when we're talking spirits and realm of the dead, then people are afraid. So basically, a spirit familiar, an animal guide, is most popularly known by the sort of Native Americanism of a lot of modern practice. However, it's true of many shamanic cultures and druidic cultures, and it's the connection of human to animal spirit, and it's the incorporation of messages via the animal spirit. So it's very often done within meditation and then path working, that the human being connects to a spirit animal, and the spirit animal is thought to embody energies that the human being requires, lessons that they need, messages that they must learn for themselves. And it can be a reflection of the person in question. Although totem animal is different from spirit guide. So totem animal tends to be the energy within oneself, and the energy of a spirit guide can be the energy of a guide. It's not necessarily a reflection of who the person is, although it can be a reflection of the person's needs, the lessons that they require, how far along they are on their spiritual journey. And the interaction with spirit familiars and spirit guides is a very, very personal one, and it can evolve over time. Some people are of the opinion that spirit guides as animals never change and you never get any different ones. And I don't personally believe that, because I've had a few energies show up at various times and then move on. Whereas I do have my main guides, animal guides, which have been with me since the beginning and have never left. So I can see arguments for both. And then the animal bones themselves become a fetish, and the fetish provides a place of sanctity for the spirit guide. It's a way of working with them, of honouring them, of incorporating them into your spiritual journey, your altar, which is basically a physical representation of your relationship with your God, your goddess, the spirit, the universe, however you best see it. And it basically is honouring that spirit guide as well as the energy of the animal in question, and they sort of accumulate. They can become a oneness. They can be taken into one another. The energy of that particular animal can often intertwine with the energy of the spirit guide. The universe being of a oneness, of an energy, oh goodness, a combination of a weaving, if you like. The threads can weave together, if that, I know what I mean, but hopefully that makes sense. And for me, I'm a person who's surrounded by crow feathers, surrounded by crows and surrounded by crow feathers. They're getting pretty close, actually. I went out down the drive this week and I had two on the wall, like, hello. And I was like, wow, that is pretty close. But I'm someone who's surrounded by feathers, and I quite often collect feathers and pick them up. And for me, that's very much of a sameness as with bones. But bones, I think people don't think of feathers and bones in the same way. Possibly because feathers can be shed, and indeed fur and things of that can be shed without the animal actually having died, without that death aspect being involved. And that's understandable, and I understand the wanting to make sure of the ethical nature of the collection of certain things, and it's up to the individual person, the individual witch, or however you define yourself, to make sure that you are ethically resourcing where your bones are coming from. I don't think I can stress that anymore or enough. But then again, you can say that with regards to everything. You can say that to crystal gathering. And make sure you're not buying from places which are basically destroying the earth in order to get hold of pretty crystals. You can say that with regards to gathering feathers, making sure you're not buying feathers from someone who's literally shooting down birds in order to make a profit. You can say this with regards to plants and make sure that you are not over harvesting for the sake of the financial profit. And I think basically you need to discern two things from when you're gathering bones or anything to do with witchcraft is, one, what is the real intention behind my gathering of this resource? Your personal intentions with regards to, in this case, bones. Is it really to honour the spirit animal in which I want to work with? Is it because spirit, goddess, God, source, however you best see it, has led me to this point where I am ready to go further along this part of my path? Am I honouring and respecting spirit work, or do I think I'm going to be dark and edgy by doing it? Because it's a lot of hard work researching into what spirit work is and treating it with a level of respect, and really making sure that you know what you're doing. And two is making sure the place that the bones in this circumstance come from, and the sort of reasoning behind that, the ethical resourcing behind that. If it's coming from somewhere else, making sure that the energies correlate, and making sure you're doing it for the right reasons and making sure they're doing it for the right reasons. Now, if you're harvesting an animal which has already passed on and you are honouring its life force, then you are basically gathering from the world. The world is not a nicey nice place all the time, and death is just commonplace, unfortunately. There is a line of thought which goes along the lines of that if an animal has died in less than pleasant circumstances, like not from natural causes, then the animal energy attached to that bone is going to be aggressive and unpleasant, and is not something you should bring into your home. Another line of reasoning along that thought process goes along the lines of that you cleanse that last experience of the animal from the bones by taking the bones that have been, it basically goes along the lines of this, that the animal lost its life in less than pleasant circumstances because, say, got hit by a car. So the animal lost its life because of the greed and insensitivity of man. And then you take that animal and show it that not all human beings are that disrespectful and disregarding of life. And you take that animal and you bury it and you give it consecration or funeral rites, and you allow that animal's energy to leave, to pass on, and then that bone can be then rededicated to an animal guide or spirit guide. To me, I feel strongly that it's likely to be the second, and I think you might want to be going on a case-by-case basis, and if the energy just feels that you don't want to be utilising that particular bone for witchcraft and spirit work, then you go with your instincts on that and you bury it and you give it a funeral rite and a consecrational rite, and you allow it to pass on and just leave it at rest. And I think that is on the personal and instinctual reactions of the individual witch, and it's up to you to really listen to your instincts and your gut, basically, about what energies are telling you. And that's something that you all have to learn no matter what spirit work you're working with, be it plant, crystal or animal. So then, once you have the bones, then what? How does that become a fetish? How does that become a bone something else? How does it transition? How does it transform? How do you utilise that within witchcraft? How does it become more than just a bone? Well, the first thing, after obviously the cleansing process, one of the main cleansing process, that there are two. There's bleaching, or there is the sort of bury and natural decomposition. Now, personally, I would nearly always go for the burial method. It takes longer, however it's more natural than bleach. It's putting something in the earth and allowing nature to take its course. It's not a value judgment of doing it the other way at all, which is arguably quicker and cleaner and easier and less icky. But for me, there is something about taking that bone and placing it in the earth and covering it up, that becomes deeply ritualistic. It becomes a rebirth, because you have placed that animal bone within the earth and covered it and buried it, and it goes into the womb of the earth, and the energy can pass on, the spirit can pass on, and as you are doing that, you want to be doing a form of magic. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go through a magical ritual for burying an animal and requesting universal aid for that, because that is something which, if you are serious about working with animal spirits and bones and things, is something that you should be investigating and writing and researching and looking into and creating within your own practice. And then once the animal bone is fully cleared and the decomposition process has fully taken effect, then there's the unearthing, the rebirthing, the coming back up into the realm of air after being in the realm of earth, or back into sky, if you like, from a Celtic perspective. Then the animal fetish is treated in a number of ways, depending on what it is. The creation of it into a spiritual item. The crow skull in front of you has the triple spiral symbol on it, and that's me, that's my doing. And depending on what it is, obviously, if it's a skull like this, it can be left as is, but then sort of painted on, drawn on, and given additional accoutrements, if you like, that all have a spiritual significance. I don't really want to talk about my other things because they are differently presented on a visual level. All of the bits have individual meaning and attachment. But drawing symbols and painting is probably the most common and simplistic, but yet full of spiritual meaning way of opening up the bone to being more than it is. Now, if it's like individual bones, if it's little bones, they can be put into a jar or a pouch, some kind of vessel, and all added to with layers of symbolism. And this can be writing symbols and ribbons and colour and crystals, all of a muchness to create a vessel. And that is then dedicated to the spirit guide in question. It is created and dedicated to the animal familiar, the animal spirit guide, as a place of sanctity, as a place of sacredness in which the animal spirit can rest and dwell, if it so designs. And it's not a spirit trap, and there are lines of thought which some people adhere to trapping spirits within certain vessels of that type. This is not something I would agree with, and therefore is not something I would talk about, because it's not something I would do. But creating a sacred and sanctified place for an animal spirit to dwell, perhaps as a place of rest, perhaps as a place of honouring and thanks after they have helped you along your spiritual journey, after you have done spirit work together, and the spirit can rest and recuperate and then go on about its business when it's ready to. And for me, that's a place of honour, it's a place of sanctity. It's nothing to do with dishonouring the memory or energy of any animal in question. Ritual is a very private place of personal evolvement, of energy, of connecting to the divine and connecting to our guides in this circumstance, as well as the divine. And the altar is a physical representation of that, be it for a spell work or honouring the gods, or altogether one, depending on how you work with her. Or him. Sorry, that's mama. But her, or him, or both. Yeah, I know. Both of a oneness, I know. And it's not a light-hearted thing. It's never, or it never should be, it certainly isn't in my path, it's never a disregarded thing. It's never without pure intention and thought process and meaning that animal bones are incorporated into one's spiritual path, into spell work and ritualistic work of honouring the gods, of honouring your particular god or goddess, of honouring the energy of death itself. And I said in brief that I think that the fear of death is one of the reasons and why that bones, and obviously media sensationalisation, get such a sort of bad press. But across culture, across tradition, bones have been utilised for the longest time, and it's very present within traditional forms of witchcraft, and it's very present within root work, hoodoo, but that tends to be all sorts of animal parts, chicken feet being the most obvious one in recent times. And it's all to do with energies of taking on attributes of the animal. Now, taking on attributes of the animal is the other, perhaps more magical, rather than ritualistic and spiritual, purpose of animal parts and bones within witchcraft. Taking on attributes of that particular animal through sympathetic magic and what is known as shapeshifting in an astral sense, because a physical sense just isn't achievable, into the animal energy within itself. Now, I'm not going to give a step-by-step guide for animal shapeshifting on the astral because it's a dangerous process. It's a process which should be treated with the utmost care and respect and learnt properly, because you don't want to be getting into problems of disconnect within the realm of the astral. You don't want to be causing yourself all manner of problems because you haven't done the research, you haven't done the work, you haven't done the preparation stages to back up that process. It's a very serious form of witchcraft, and there's this big feeling that's going around, which is that witchcraft can be dangerous and should be treated with the utmost respect, and there is a tendency in sort of new age communities, inverted commas, that it tries to get simplified, it tries to get sort of made into something more acceptable, sort of cleansed, sort of I'm trying to think of how best to put it. Made into something overly simple and overly light and fluffy rather than what it actually is. And I'm hesitant to say that because I think there is an element of value judgment and disrespect towards certain areas of witchcraft which don't deserve it. I know there is a lot of Wicca bashing, for example, that comes off that line of reasoning, which I don't agree with. But things such as astral shapeshifting and seeking out the energies from one's soul to take the form of an animal in the astral is advanced witchcraft and requires a level of respect. Now, I think personally all bone work requires a level of respect and personal responsibility, which I've already talked about at length. From, a vegetarian point of view, I think vegetarians could work with bones. I'm guessing vegans cannot because they just disagree with it altogether. I'm not personally vegetarian, so there you go. But it's not about the mass production of animals to be consumed. It's about taking the bones of animals which have passed on from ethical, resourced places and creating a thing of great sanctity, a thing of great sacred beauty, a thing of great reverence. It's not about the disrespect or disregard for animals whatsoever. I know a lot of witches who are heavily into animal protection and animal rights, and they would willingly work with bones of animals that have died on their property or have died within their land, if you like, their land area, from natural causes. We touched on animals that have already, that have passed on because they've been hit by cars and things, and I think that again comes down to the instincts and the feeling that the individual has with regards to that particular animal. I touched on shapeshifting. There is the taking on of attributes of animal parts within spell work. I'm trying to think. All I've got going through my head is witch hairs, because I was reading about witch hairs today within the Celtic tradition. I've got witch hairs to be quick in my head. Is this coming, Okay, I think the most obvious example is people incorporating black cat hair into black cat oil. And black cat oil is a return to sender, and I believe it is of the hoodoo tradition originally, and is a well-known return to sender, and people will use black cat hairs and indeed black dog hairs in some circumstances within their magic, because it's believed that the sympathy of the magic is there to return to sender. And fossilized shark teeth is an example, and they're readily available, fossilized shark teeth. Fossilized shark teeth can be used to take a bite out of things, and that can be in a less than pleasant spell work sense, or it can be in a very protective sense, just that if anyone attacks you, then the shark teeth protection is up and it will take a bite out of anybody who is attempting to cause harm. Feathers are another example. So my swan feather, which is in shot, is a gift from a friend, and there is a great purity of swans. And I use my swan feather for purification work. I use it to cleanse my space. And swans have this incredible grace, this incredible beauty. They also mate for life. So for me, there's this incredible purity to the energy of swans. I find them incredibly beautiful, and they're very powerful. And when you see the swans' wings going as they're taking off, you'll know exactly what I mean about them being, having that purifying sense, because that air is just like a whoosh, and that sympathetic magic comes from that. It comes from that deep power, that betweenness between water, earth and sky as they're taking off, and the incorporation of all those energies within a Celtic pantheon means something of great purity, of creating a purified spiritual space. So that is an energy that the feather takes on in terms of sympathetic magic, which I incorporate into my spell work with the swan feather. So I think that's all I really wanted to cover. If I've missed anything, then please, pop a question down below. I'll do my best. I've got a bit behind in answering questions because of recent events, but I think that's it. So this was Bones in Witchcraft. I hope you enjoyed this video, and many blessings.